lowest, greatest, highest, I will come to thee.
Ezra 1 and verse number 1 says this: Now in the first year of Cyrus king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put in writing, saying, Thus says Cyrus king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth of the Lord God of heaven has given me, and he has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is among you of all his people? May his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel. He is God, which is in Jerusalem. And whoever is left in any place where he dwells, let the men of his place help him with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, besides the freewill offerings for the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. This was an amazing time in history because we have a heathen king who did not believe in one particular God, who ended up becoming a vessel for God, as he was the main reason God's promise was fulfilled that he made through Jeremiah and Isaiah. The first thing I want to point out are some of the main points our verses have taught us. These events were the fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy in Jeremiah 29, verses 12 through 15. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus. Cyrus was given his position of power by the providence of God. Cyrus was changed by God to build his house, and he would do it by sending the Jews back to Jerusalem. The rebuilding of God's house would be funded partly by the Persians who were around Jerusalem. This will become more apparent as we get further into the book of Ezra. Since these events are so precisely dictated by prophecy, they prove that God had a hand in these events. I also want to share with you some historical proof that has been found in regards to these events. In 1879, an explorer by the name of Hormuz Rassam discovered the famous Cyrus Cylinder at the site of the ancient Babylon, and this artifact can be seen at the British Museum. The Cyrus Cylinder is a small 9-inch long barrel-shaped clay chronicle that describes the benevolent policy of Cyrus in restoring captives to their homelands, along with their religious treasures. Please notice part of this inscription that records what Cyrus said. I return to these sacred cities the other side of the Tigris, the sanctuaries of which have been ruins for a long time. The images which used to live therein and established for them permanent sanctuaries. I also gathered all their former inhabitants and returned to them their habitations. This gives us strong external proof that King Cyrus did exactly what the book of Ezra said that he did. And it also shows King Cyrus' benevolent attitude toward those who were under his power. King Cyrus was not a cruel king like many others had been. Instead, he was a kind and fair man, and his character is also found in external history as well. For example, Xenophon, a Greek writer who was contemporary with Cyrus and fought in his army, described the Persian ruler as a humane, benevolent, loving soul. George Rawson, Camden Professor of Ancient History at Oxford University, wrote the following concerning Cyrus. Of all the Persian monarchs, he was the one most distinguished for mildness and clemency, the one to whom the sufferings of a captive nation, torn violently from its home and subjected to 70 years of grievous oppression, would most forcibly have appealed. 1873. Cyrus's kind nature made him the perfect king to carry out God's promise to the Jews. It is also interesting that Cyrus called the Jews God, God of heaven, because based on the external history of the Persians and Cyrus himself, they believed in multiple gods and they considered the God of heaven as being their supreme God. Yet we find Cyrus given this title to Jehovah. Much more could be said about this, but what I want you to get out of this, besides these historical facts, is that God is in control. Isaiah prophesied about King Cyrus 200 years before he was born in Isaiah 45 and verse number 1. God knew exactly what was going to take place to put an end to his people's 70 years of captivity. We must never forget verses like Proverbs 21, verse number 1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Like the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes. Romans 13, verse number 1. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. So let us never underestimate the power of God's providence and His ability to change the hearts of those who are over us in our nation. With this in mind, let us never cease praying for our nation and our leaders that they might change their ways and move closer to God and His ways, because God is certainly in control.